I don't know if you heard, there's a new quarterback in the Indianapolis Colts ecosystem that will be our starter. Daniel Jones has beaten out Anthony Richardson for the job. And this is one of those moments that I frankly, I saw coming, but this is not a moment that is without controversy.
Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Daniel Jones. Just kidding. Mount Rushmore in Indianapolis. I'm with you that this was the right decision, that I expected this decision, but just because it's the right decision doesn't mean I have to like it. And just because it's the right decision doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily end up being a good decision for the Indianapolis Colts, because you know you're in a really scary place as a franchise when your best option in the quarterback room is Daniel Jones. Look, no disrespect to Daniel Jones, but he is what he is. He's not going to be a guy that's going to march you to the playoffs. He's not going to be a guy that can single-handedly win games for you. In fact, he's a guy that's probably going to lose a couple of games for you. That's what we've learned about Daniel Jones so far in his career. And I just have to wonder if it's like, how did we get here in Indianapolis? Obviously, you have Peyton Manning, and then when he went through the neck surgery, they were so bad that they were able to land Andrew Luck. And no pun intended, as we're going on the theme of puns for quarterbacks on today's show so far. They were just lucky that that happened. And so then Andrew Luck brought them into this new era of the Indianapolis Colts. But ever since then, it's been a turnstile at the quarterback position. It's been Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan and Jacoby Brissett and Phillip Rivers. And what in the world is the plan in Indianapolis? I can be okay with being bad as long as you have a plan. If Daniel Jones is your best plan in Indianapolis, I can't really trust in that vision.
I see. You're right. This isn't a good decision. This is a great decision. I'm all in on this. I think
Well,
this was the right
great
thing.
decision.
This is a great decision. This is great. Look, Anthony Richardson is just not a starting quarterback in the NFL. It's not Anthony Richardson's fault that he was overdrafted, but he was overdrafted. At the end of the day, even when I was covering the draft that year and he was drafted, we all looked around and thought, man, I don't know. I know we saw great athletic moments from Anthony Richardson, and we want to turn that into great quarterbacking, but that was never the case for Anthony Richardson. He had a couple of huge plays at Florida that we all fell in love with, but there wasn't a body of work that gave any indication that he was actually deserving of being a top pick in the first round. What everybody kept saying is you're drafting for traits, and we need to develop traits. Well, what if the player doesn't want to be part of that development? He's had 3 years in this offense, and he couldn't beat out Daniel Jones, who's been in it for about 30 seconds. He should have control. He hasn't had to deal with different coordinators, different head coaches, different calling, different languages. He hasn't had to deal with any of that. All he's had to do is master the system in front of him, and he simply hasn't done that. And I'm not just talking about in games. I'm talking about in practice, because Shane Steichen said this offseason that the decision would be based on consistency, which means they're looking at everything day in and day out. And I see the tweet there that talks about his age. Okay, he's young. That's fine. He's had 3 years. How many players in the NFL get 3 years in the same offense to try and figure it out? And he's gotten beaten out every single time that somebody could beat him out. At some point, can't we just accept that maybe Anthony Richardson isn't all that good? Like, we keep talking about this like they blew it with Anthony Richardson. What if he, A, didn't do the things he needed to do? And what if he, B, even if he did, just isn't good enough? Like, Daniel Jones today is a better quarterback. So you play your better players when you start going into a season.
And I'm with you there that right now, Daniel Jones gives you a better chance to win football games than Anthony Richardson. That is, I wholeheartedly believe that. And obviously, the Colts do too, because Shane Steichen, the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, already said that Daniel Jones is going to be the starter for the entirety of the season. He's not opening the door for any sort of opportunity or growth or development for Anthony Richardson. So, yes, Daniel Jones does give you the better opportunity to win right now. But you say Anthony Richardson was overdrafted. That could be true. But was he overdrafted or was he underdeveloped? Was he rushed? Was he mismanaged by the Indianapolis Colts organization? Now, at this point, that's all kind of, it's all history. Like, we're past that. That Anthony Richardson, at this point, I think, has already been ruined by the Colts. They rushed him. He went too early. He started 13 games in Florida. He came out and he was too young. He wasn't ready. Now, again, we're past that. That's water under the bridge at this point. The Colts have done what the Colts have done, but I can't wholeheartedly believe that this is, Anthony Richardson was just given chance after chance after chance after chance when I believe he was mismanaged, when he was injured. Well, how many chances do you really have when you can't be on the field? I understand your best ability is your availability, and Anthony Richardson has not been available. So if you lose your job because you've been injured and there's a clear and obvious better choice, then sorry, that happens. Welcome to the National Football League. I just think the Colts mismanaged and misstepped every single step of the way with Anthony Richardson, and now they find themselves in a place where their best option is Daniel Jones. That doesn't mean it's a good one. And I think at this point, it's fair to ask how many games the Colts can actually win. That if they can win a few games, 9, 10 games, and make the playoffs, then sure, Daniel Jones might be your bridge quarterback until you find your next guy. But if he's not, then that's the path to a top 5 pick and finding your quarterback of the future. So maybe it's not the worst path in the world. It just feels icky to say that your best path is Daniel Jones.
I think what's happened here though is that this is what we do with quarterbacks. We get so dialed in on like what we think of that player, but come on, everybody laughed at one point that Sam Darnold was going to be a quarterback of a franchise. Everybody laughed at the Buccaneers for picking up Baker Mayfield. Everybody laughed at the time at the Seattle Seahawks for picking up Geno Smith. Like this is an almost annual tradition of quarterbacks that have bounce backs, right? And so maybe I'm being too optimistic, but the fact is this Colts team was in contention in Anthony Richardson's first year with Gardner Minshew at the quarterback position. I watched Gardner Minshew as a Raiders fan last year. Ain't no way your team should be in contention with Gardner Minshew as a quarterback, but they were. And then they go into last year and they get this weird combination of Flacco and Anthony Richardson that never took off. In fact, they were in playoff positioning until their quarterback play took them out of that at the end of the season last year. This is a team that we talk about like they're a disaster. They went 8-9. They were in the playoff hunt. So if I'm looking around as a coaching staff, I no longer give a damn about Anthony Richardson's development if he doesn't look good enough day in and day out of practice. If he's not doing the things he's got to do in practice, Daniel Jones might not be a great option. They may not think he is. But if they look around and think he's even just the tiniest better, just the littlest portion better than Anthony Richardson, well, damn, you almost made the playoffs last year. You owe it to every other person on that 53-man roster to put the best you got out there. And the best you got this year, it's clearly Daniel Jones. So I think what we've done is two things. We've overhyped Anthony Richardson because of some of the highlight plays that we all loved in college football. And the things like Dan Orlovsky said smartly, that there are certain things you can't teach, and he has them. We all agree with that. But if he hasn't put those together, and now you've got this person over here, Daniel Jones, that we've just decided stinks. We just decided we didn't like where he was drafted either. We didn't like it when he got paid. We've created narratives on Daniel Jones. So all of a sudden we're letting those narratives battle when in fact, right now it's really simple. Daniel Jones this year in practice, better than Anthony Richardson, which means when you were 8-9, and frankly, I think the Colts can and will win the division with Daniel Jones. I think that's why you have to play Daniel Jones. You can't win the division with Anthony Richardson. You got a shot at it with Daniel Jones.
But Fitz, these aren't narratives about Daniel Jones. This is real. Like it is reality. It is what happened, and it's what we've seen from Daniel Jones. And look, with Anthony Richardson and everything that we've heard about him, if obviously he took himself out of a game. We've heard that he is the last one in and the first one out. That maybe with those things that we've heard, maybe Anthony Richardson never would have worked out as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Maybe if he sat on the bench for 2 years, he still wouldn't have been able to progress or show signs that he could be a starter in this league. I don't know. Like, sure, that could be in a different world, in a different timeline, could be in the realm of possibility. But my point is, we're never going to get that opportunity to know if he for sure could have worked out or not, because the Colts got impatient and just went ahead and wanted to start him, even when it was so clear and obvious to all of us that that shouldn't have been a possibility. But here is my thing with Daniel Jones. You talk about, the reclamation projects that we've seen, Geno Smith and Sam Darnold. Well, for every Geno Smith and Sam Darnold, we have a Justin Fields. He went to the Steelers and showed us, no, maybe it wasn't the Bears, maybe it was just him. Russell Wilson post his time in Seattle. Denver sells the farm for Russell Wilson, and he very, very early showed that, hey, that was a bad deal. So yes, that there can be guys, and I hope for Daniel Jones, and I hope for the Indianapolis Colts franchise that Daniel Jones is that next Sam Darnold and Geno Smith. But just because it happened in the past, and just because we've seen it almost every single year, doesn't mean that Daniel Jones is going to be that guy. Maybe he just is what he is, a bridge quarterback and probably a high quality backup.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you that it's not easy to have a ton of faith in Daniel Jones, but I still think back to the year a couple of years ago. He threw for 3,200 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 5 picks, 67% completion percentage that year. He did all of that in a year that the Giants were basically forced into paying him because of his playoff success as well. That's something to me, and I still believe in Shane Steichen. I believe Shane Steichen can get the most out of his quarterback.